The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
The METUS Tech Show.
All right, it's grilling season. It's officially grilling season, right?
My favorite season.
Yes. You know, whether you're using charcoal, smoker, or propane grill, doesn't matter, right? It's all good. It really doesn't matter. You know, when I think of summer grilling, I'm thinking just running out there and throwing some stuff on the grill real quick and, you know, not necessarily the barbecue. We've already talked about barbecue to death, right? Smoking and all that, fat side up, fat side down. Let's not do that again. Let's talk about you're running out there. You're going to throw some charcoal in your grill, or you're going to use a chimney and grill your food on charcoal, and we can have the whole charcoal propane debate. But what are some of the go-to foods that you're just going to throw on there for whether you're doing a party or whether you're just cooking for the family? What are your favorites?
I mean, just mainly beef franks, burgers, and I love doing chicken thighs on the grill.
Yeah, there's something about chicken thighs that.
Oh, yeah.
Bone in for me.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And the skin stays on, too.
Thank you for saying that.
I like getting that skin crunchy.
Yeah, you ever... Juan, do you ever do like a light coat of mayo on the skin? Okay.
Mayo. And I spray it with olive oil too.
Okay.
Is that just supposed to make it crispier? Or?
Yes, it can. Yes. So when you cook it with the light, you're not coating the whole thing. Well, I do have a recipe that I do for chicken thighs. Is it's mayo and Italian dressing. Let that marinate for an hour, a couple hours, whatever that is, and then cook that on the grill. Just be aware when you do that, fire likes to kick up, just depending on what you're smoking out of. But
I don't have to worry about fire.
No, you do not, Juan.
No. Yeah, I bought me a new Rectech, and I have not smoked anything yet. So this weekend is going to be my first rack of ribs.
Oh, cool!
To break it in.
One rack, 2 racks.
Well, because I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to try one first, just in case it fails.
St. Louis or baby backs?
St. Louis.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice.
All right. So here we go with back into barbecue. So, I like lately I've been on last few years, I've been on a kick with brat sausages, beer brats.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been finding at the supermarket, there's like a whole selection of different brat sausages that you can get with like cheese, like provolone and pepper, and it's just amazing. Like I've been like, wow, I've been missing out on these for all these years, and it's just such a great food to grill. I don't even throw it in a hot dog bun or a bun or anything per se. I just cut them up after you grill them, and they're just fantastic.
Yeah, I like mixing them with green pepper or any type of bell pepper and onions. Oh man, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
So something else that you said hamburgers and hot dogs. That's just a staple. That's just
standard.
It's just awesome. But I've been doing some pretty cool stuff on the grill. Me and my wife, I'll make like a little bowl out of tin foil and load it up with some shrimp, some Old Bay seasoning. I'll throw some scallops in there, maybe some lobster meat in there, with potatoes, some sausage cut up in there, some corn on the cob sliced up, little pieces of corn on the cob.
Man.
And you just put some Old Bay in there and a little bit of olive oil, and you close up the tin foil, and you throw these on the grill for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you have a little like clam boil inside of a tin foil, and it's heaven. Oh, and butter. You got to put butter in this thing. So don't forget to put the butter in there. And it's heaven. You may want to boil the potatoes a little bit, pre-boil them a little bit before you put them in there because they're going to take a little longer. But that's been an amazing addition to the grill. The other thing I've been doing that I've found on websites, I'm going to give them a shout out, Barbecue Pit Boys. They have a bunch of videos on YouTube. They do these things called onion bombs and potato bombs. So the onion bomb, you grab a whole onion, you throw a little on the top of the onion, you get rid of the eye of the onion, they say, right? You cut that out and you make like a small cup in the top of the onion. You throw a beef bouillon cube in there, some Worcestershire sauce, and you wrap it in foil, and you throw those on the grill, and the onion just falls apart when it's done. Man. And it's got that beef broth, Worcestershire sauce. Potato bombs are just fantastic. You can get an apple core, and you core out the potato, save the core because you're going to use that as the plug. But you core out the potato, and you stuff it with cheese and maybe some prosciutto, right?
What's that?
That goes out to Roland. Roland could never say prosciutto, but
I don't think I can either.
So some prosciutto or some ham, whatever you want. You could put sausage in there, cooked sausage, right? And you stuff that in, and you put the plugs, the core that you took out. You make 2 plugs out of it, and you plug the potato, and you throw those on the grill with some tin foil, and all of that just cooks in there, and
wow,
it's just fantastic. Yeah, you got to have a little time to cook them, but what about corn on the cob on the grill?
Love it.
So good.
Right?
Yeah. Sweet corn. Oh my goodness. Another thing that I'll do with hamburger meat is I'll dice some peppers and onions, and I'll just mix it with the meat. And then before I put it on the grill, I'll punch a hole, but I'll put some Parmesan cheese in the center so the cheese is inside the burger. Then I'll throw them in the grill, and everybody loves them.
Another thing you do is add blue cheese, and when the blue cheese oozes out, that's when that's the trick where your burger's
That's when
done.
It's ready.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My go-to for summer grilling is I cook a lot of tri-tip, which those in the country and the east side of the country doesn't really know what that means or type of meat. Similar cut to a London broil type cut, but that's my go-to because it's quick. It's beef, right? 20 minutes on one side, 10 minutes on another side, perfect medium. I marinate my tri-tip. Probably, I'm not kidding you, for 5 days.
Wow.
A lot of people are like, whoa. And I was like, trust me, you just every day, the trick of any marinade, right? Every day, flip that, in the refrigerator, flip that, your meat every day. So that way, equal parts, whatever. And then another big thing is, I'm sure you guys all do this. I'm sure we all have our special ways. I love doing potato packets, right, on the grill. So get the foil, and then cut up all the potatoes in the chunks, put your butter, your peppers, your onions, and any type of seasoning and stuff like that. And then clamp it up, and then make sure it's like a tent almost, so you can get that steam that gets in there. And then I do that on the grill a lot too.
That's awesome. Yeah. What about you, Bryn?
I keep it simple. I mean, Juan kind of nailed it on the head. I just like burgers and hot dogs, to be honest. Nobody's mentioned yet, and I'm not sure if it's something you guys are into, but kielbasa. You go to like an actual butcher and get real kielbasa. I'll put that on the grill where it starts
with sauerkraut.
I like horseradish sauce. So you get it on the grill where it starts to blister, and then I get that nice spicy horseradish sauce. It's like perfect. So good.
Awesome.
You say horseradish? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
No. I love spicy. But
yeah. Hold the horseradish. Yeah, Bryn likes his burgers, and we went to a barbecue place out in Chicago, and I'm like, oh yeah, give me some briskets, give me some ribs, and I order all the stuff. We go and sit down and we're waiting for our food. So I'm like, Bryn, what'd you get? It's like, I got a burger. And I wanted to jump over the counter and the booth and choke him to death. So I'm like, we're at a barbecue place, but hey, he likes his burgers, and
exactly
that's all good. Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, everybody. We got Juan Cardona out of Ohio, Scott Tallman out of Suwanee, Georgia, Bryn Raptor out of Boston, Massachusetts, and myself, Steve Pimentel, out of Boston as well. And today we're going to talk about some VRF stuff. We're going to talk about R2 refrigerant patterns and segmenting of the outdoor coils. Right? I think we do a lot of podcast episodes on residential stuff, and I don't think we do enough on city multi-commercial stuff. So Nick out in Hawaii, we did a podcast with him last week. He's going to love this one. I know we're going to get an email. He's going to say, "Oh, this is great," because this is what he works on every day. Right? Nick's the man. So, Juan, why do we segment, first of all, the R2 system, and we also segment the Y series? Right?
Yes. Yep.
We segment the Y series as well, but why do we segment the outdoor condenser coils?
Well, first, Steve, let's tell the audience what R2 and Y series are. R2 is a heat recovery system, city multi, which provides simultaneous heating and cooling. That's heating and cooling at the same time.
Yep.
And then the Y series is just our standard city multi heat pump system, which only provides heat or cool. It is not a heat recovery system. But the reason why we segment, there's going to come a time when the system is not at full load or full demand or 100% capacity. So due to capacity control, we don't need the whole coil outside. So we're able to use a portion of it to provide the heating or the cooling that we need without using the whole coil and the energy of all the fans.
Yeah, and that's what makes our system so efficient. Why, like you said, why use a whole condenser coil and waste all that energy when we have a low load condition, mild days, maybe shoulder months that we're dealing with?
That's right. And that's the beauty of it. That's what makes the system efficient. We're using refrigeration to its full extent in our systems. The way we manage capacity, the way we manage our temperatures at the indoor coil, whether it's heating or cooling, we do a lot of that control that provides that efficiency to the system.
Yeah, and so what a lot of people don't realize is we have patterns, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. We have patterns for each system, patterns in cooling and patterns in heating.
Yep.
So, Bryn, talk about the coil segments as far as the size of the modules and how many coil segments you can expect to see on an outdoor unit.
Sure. So with our 72,000 BTU to our 144,000 BTUs, it's broken up into two coil segments. So with those two coil segments, we get 4 cooling patterns as well as 2 heating patterns. So the main difference with our units that are 72 to 144 is the number of segments. Once we get above that 144, anything 168 and above, we actually have 3 coil segments. We still only have the 4 cooling patterns and the 2 heating patterns. It's just the way that those patterns stage is a little bit different. And then the main difference is with our units 168 and larger, you will see actually 3 reversing valves in that outdoor unit that are responsible, at least 2 of them, responsible for that segmenting of the coil.
Yeah, and that'll kind of throw a technician off when they open up a unit and see 3 reversing valves. If they're not used to working on Mitsubishi VRF, and say, why is there 3 reversing valves? Are they all switching the system over to heat? Why are they in there? No, like you said, one is mainly responsible for switching the system over to heat mode. The other 2 are going to be responsible, or the other 1 or 2 are going to be responsible for segmenting the coil. It depends on the size of that system.
Yep. Right. Granted, these are in the latest version of our City Multi product, because previous generations we used a solenoid block, which is now has been replaced with these reversing valves.
Yeah, and in conjunction with the LEVs that are making that segmenting possible. So we need to manage refrigerant, right? When we shut things down, refrigerant's got to go somewhere. So we're going to kind of talk about what is happening, and without visuals, it's kind of tough, but we'll do the best we can to explain what's happening in these different cooling patterns and how we're segmenting.
Hey, Steve, so before we start, we should probably, because some models we have 2 reversing valves, some model we have 3. So our main reversing valve is marked 21S4A, correct?
Good point.
And then
yes.
that's the main reversing valve. Now units from 72 to what, Bryn?
144.
144 will have the second reversing valve, 21S4B, and then the larger models
with only 3 pipes connected to it, because the
Correct.
reversing valve typically has 4 pipe connections.
Thank you for
But we use the 21S4B and C on the 168 for coil segmentation, but we only use 3 pipe connections out of the 4.
Correct. So I just wanted to make sure that the terminology is there.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a good point that you made, Juan, that it only has 3 pipes. It's isolating part of the condenser coil, but it's also being used to drain refrigerant from that, because we don't want refrigerant just sitting there trapped in the condenser coil when it can
Correct.
be used somewhere else. So understanding that those reversing valves are serving 2 purposes: the segmenting of the coil and also draining of the coil.
And the fact that we don't close the LEVs 100%, that LEV right on the outlet side of the condenser is closed, but it's not 100% closed. So it's also allowing some of the liquid to, due to gravity, flow through that LEV as well. For, like you said, Steve, for the most part, when we energize that reversing valve, we're opening that coil to the suction side of the system to boil that liquid refrigerant that is found inside that coil.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's start with go ahead, Bryn.
Yeah, I was going to say the easy way to think about it, because we don't have visuals, is on our inlet to the condenser. So the inlet to the outdoor unit, we have our reversing valve. And then on the outlet side of that segment is an LEV. And so they're married together.
Yep.
So 21S4A is married to what we call LEV2A. 21S4B is married to what we call LEV2B. And then with the larger units, we have 21S4C, which is married to LEV2C. They're just on the inlet and outlet of that coil, and they work together when we're segmenting that coil.
I love that. That was a great
good explanation,
Bryn. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a great visual, Bryn.
Yes. Let's start with cooling pattern 1. Now, cooling pattern 1, let's think of that as main cooling, 100% cooling, full load in the building. Call it test run, call it whatever you want, but that system is looking for 100% cooling out of all the indoor units. There's a full demand on that system. What's happening with our LEVs? And let's look at the 72 to 144, the smaller chassis, because we're looking at 2 LEVs on the outlet of the condenser coil, 2 reversing valves on the inlet, right? What's happening? What position are those valves in cooling pattern 1?
So we are allowing the high pressure, high temperature vapor from the compressor to go through the reversing valve and enter the condenser coils. Since we're operating at 100% capacity, so we condense at the condenser coil. We come out as a high pressure, high temperature liquid, and then we go through an LEV. LEV2A and LEV2B, which are wide open, because we don't want to temper with that liquid flow. We want to make sure we get that liquid at the inlet of the LEV.
Yeah, so I like to think of cooling pattern 1 as like a true HVAC, a true air conditioning system in cooling.
Yep.
The whole condenser coil is being utilized at that point. What we didn't talk about yet is the LEV2D. So that LEV, I like to think of as a bypass. Now, recently, Bryn, and we learn a lot as instructors teaching our classes, especially the advanced city multi, when we get hammered with questions from very smart technicians, that it makes us kind of think. And recently, correct me if I'm wrong, Bryn, but LEV2D has another purpose as well. Yeah, so I mean, in the system.
It's always a bypass LEV. So like we talked about, LEV2A is 21S4A, LEV2B is 21S4B. But when we start going into mixed modes, we're not doing all of our heat rejection outside anymore. So when you're looking at the cooling pattern of cooling pattern 1, we're doing 100% of our heat rejection outside. So we want a full column of subcooled liquid going into our branch controller because there are no units calling for that high pressure, high temp, superheated vapor coming off the compressor. But what happens when we start mixing modes? We're not doing all our heat rejection outside anymore. So what LEV2D will do once we start to enter these mixed modes is we're going to start to enter our cooling pattern 2, 3, or 4, depending on how much heat demand is inside. And LEV2D is going to start to open. And all that LEV2D is based on where it's mounted or located is right off the top of our compressor. Rather than going into our outdoor unit, we're going to pass through LEV2D with that high temp, high pressure, superheated vapor, and it's going to mix in with what comes out of our condenser. So rather than going inside as a full column of subcooled liquid, we're actually a liquid gas mixture or saturated vapor if you want to think of it that way. Because once we get into our branch controller, we've got our liquid gas separator. That's where these things are going to branch off. We're going to get that high temp, high pressure, superheated vapor to our heating calls, that subcooled liquid going to our cooling calls.
Yep.
Yeah. So that kind of, when Bryn brought that up, I never really thought of it that way because we need, for when we start changing patterns, meaning where we have some indoor units in heat, some indoor units in cool. What about the indoor units in heat? Well, we need some kind of high temperature discharge gas for those units coming off the top of the gas liquid separator, and LEV2D is going to provide that.
Right.
So let's go into cooling pattern 2. Now, one of two things is happening. We have indoor units that are calling for 2 modes, cooling and heating, or we have less of a demand on the indoor units, less amount of indoor units calling for cooling, and they're shutting down. Maybe they're satisfying. Maybe they're on a side of a building that doesn't have much of a heat load, right? So what's happening in cooling pattern 2, Juan?
Well, we're energizing 21S4B, which is the second reversing valve. We're not necessarily energizing 21S4A because we may be in more of a cooling demand than we may be in a heating demand.
Right.
Or like you said, only part cooling. So we energize 21S4B to isolate one of the coils on the outdoor unit. We also close the LEV that's buried to that reversing valve. So we're actually segmenting, we're closing that coil. But as we energize 21S4B, which is the reversing valve, we're opening that segment to the suction side. So because we're going to we don't want that refrigerant to go to waste. We want to boil that refrigerant out of that coil so we can use it where we need it somewhere in the system. So we're actually at part load. We're, maybe 50% capacity. So why do we need the whole coil outside when we don't?
Right.
So at that point, LEV2D, right? Now this is where it comes to mixed modes. Now this is where it's metering at a certain position depending on what the demand is.
Yeah, good point, Scott, because at cooling pattern 1, LEV2D was closed.
Yes.
Right. We weren't bypassing. It's at its minimum position, where now cooling pattern 2, we've segmented part of the outdoor condenser coil. We need to manage refrigerant. Yep. So we need to send some of that refrigerant right into the liquid line, or like Bryn stated, we may have units calling for heat. Maybe the shoulder months have some units calling for heat, and we need that high temperature discharge gas directly to the gas liquid separator.
And one more point that I want to make here, since we're talking about LEVs, is that not all LEVs are used to drop pressure and change the state of the refrigerant.
Right.
Because, the technicians may be hearing us speak about LEVs. Well, are you really metering the refrigerant coming out of the condenser? No, we're not. We're using it as a solenoid valve, per se.
Yes. I had that exact conversation with the LEV2D in particular, which is what happens when you take a high temperature, high pressure superheated vapor and pass it through an LEV. Are you going to change state? No. So I would always tell our contractors in class, you got to think of it almost like an adjustable ball valve, or like you said, a solenoid where it's opening and closing just to change the amount of refrigerant passing through. It's not there to change state like we see with, a typical metering device in your refrigeration circuit that's actually dropping that pressure, dropping that temperature, and changing state.
Yeah, and Scott can relate to this. It's almost like a circuit setter.
Yep, exactly
right?
what it is.
With your test and balance background, right?
Yes. And to everyone's point and everyone on the call, because we're talking about cooling patterns, right? So I'm going to take a shout out to Juan, because, when I first started a couple years ago, he told me, we got to read the manual. We got to read the manual, right? So service manual, outdoor service manual, chapter 5. It goes over all the cooling patterns, LEV positionings, and so forth. Because when I look at a maintenance tool, we can all attest to this, right? We can look at a maintenance tool file, and just by looking at the file, looking at the LEV positions, looking at the reversing valves positions, we can just tell right away what pattern it's in, right? Everyone.
Yep.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're going to just move along. Now we're going into cooling pattern 3. So what's happening? Again, are units satisfying? Are units changing modes? So at this point, you could see 21S4A switch over to heat and switch that system into a heating mode. At this point, maybe not, and it all depends on the amount of indoor units. How many indoor units are calling for heating? How many indoor units are calling for cooling?
Yep.
And I want to point out that with all of this that we're talking about, you can see all of this happening on maintenance tool. So you can see these valves changing, being energized, being de-energized, and managing refrigerant. But Scott, can you talk about cooling pattern 3 and what the LEVs are doing there?
Yeah, so with that, what's going on there is obviously we're sending refrigerant to the coil. So we're segmenting just like we're doing in pattern 2. Right, so reversing valve 21S4B, we're closed. We are energized on that coil, and the LEV now at this point on cooling pattern number 2, LEV 2A is wide open. Cooling pattern number 3, now this is where we're going to start to close that LEV, and then just like the previous cooling pattern, LEV B is still closed, and now 2D. That's metering. That LEV is going to be wide open.
Yeah.
Yep. So in this instance right here, we're talking about a situation where potentially we're getting close to about 50% capacity in heating, 50% capacity in cooling. We've got a large heat demand inside. So not only are we segmenting our portion of our coil, but we're actually starting to close off our main portion of that coil, our main segment of that coil, and LEV2D, because of the large heat demand inside, is just about wide open, allowing a large amount of high temp, high pressure superheated vapor to go inside. So our heating demand, we need way more or maybe equal parts of that high temp, high pressure superheated vapor out the compressor to go inside. So LEV2D has got to be just about wide open so that we have enough of that. And this is where the system, and we have this conversation with contractors, of course, in class, but this is that situation where we tend to think, okay, right when we switch from 50% capacity in heating to 50% capacity in cooling, we're going to switch and go into heating mode. And that's not necessarily the case. Right. Our system is logarithmic or algorithmic. It's going to determine, okay, can I hit targets still staying in cooling mode? And it will make a determination based on its ability to hit targets when to make that change. So you could even see more capacity in heating than in cooling, and you may still be in cooling only or cooling main. And that's because of the fact that it's still able to maintain target given the circumstance. So this is where things can kind of get to that point where it's considering, should I start to maybe switch over to heating main?
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. And I just wanted to point out that we're not talking about LEV pulse positions or step position of an LEV. And I don't want to get too in depth on LEV step positions, but we're basically looking at 2,000 step LEVs, 3,000 step LEVs, and larger chassis outdoor units we could see as high as a 6,000 step LEV. And those steps are shown on maintenance tool or on the outdoor unit LED screen if you're utilizing the SW4 dip switches that we talked about on a previous episode. But they can be looked at either at the outdoor unit LED screen or usually on maintenance tools, most popular, what everybody's using maintenance tool, they can see every minute those changes on those LEVs, the pulse positions. So
That's a good point, because when you talk, and I'm only going to mention or talk about the 3,000 step valve, which is on the smaller capacity units on LEV 2A and 2B. So when they're wide open, maintenance tool, you can see they can manage 3,000 steps. But like I said, they don't fully closed. So those LEVs, when we're segmenting that coil, that LEV will go to 41. So at 41, might as well be closed, but it's not 100% closed.
Right. 41 out of 3,000 is just about closed.
Yeah, absolutely.
now, correct me if I'm wrong, Bryn, but cooling pattern 4 is now the larger chassis. It's only available on the larger chassis, 168 and above. And that has 3 coil segments. So now we're looking at 21S4A, 21S4B, and C for reversing valves, and 3 LEVs, LEV-A, 2A, 2B, and 2C. So at that point, we're able to get 4 cooling patterns out of the larger chassis.
Yeah, and I mean the main difference, because realistically the patterns are just about the same. Typically, once we enter pattern 2 with our larger chassis, both 21S4B and 21S4C are going to energize, and we're going to see LEV 2B and 2C start to close down. That 4th pattern is where things start to change, and really all it is we're still going to have LEV 2D wide open, and rather than LEV 2A being at, let's say, 1,000 pulses, it's going to drop down even further to about 600 pulses. So really that 4th pattern is just even further knocking down that main portion of that coil, LEV.
Very little liquid going through that LEV.
Yep.
Just been okay.
Yeah, what I love about segmenting is it serves 2 purposes. We didn't talk about one of them, and you know, besides segmenting the coil and using only what we need of the condenser coil for efficiency, we can also do something called continuous heating mode.
Yep.
Right. So we're not going to talk about heating patterns today, but I just wanted to touch on defrost. How do we defrost the system and not make the customer uncomfortable while the defrost is happening? Right. So we can provide continuous heating by defrosting the segment of coil, usually the bottom section of the coil, which gets the most ice and frost on it. We can defrost one section of the coil and use the other section for continuous heating in those indoor units, so the customer doesn't even know a defrost is happening. And I thought that when I found out we did that, it just blew my mind. This is just genius, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
All right, so that I think about covers patterns in cooling. And again, we'll save heating patterns for another episode.
Another day. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. We covered it pretty good on the cooling side.
All right, so let's recap of what we talked about. We talked about segmenting the outdoor coils for efficiency, right? For capacity control, LEV2A, 2B, and if there's a 2C on the larger segments, 21S4A, 21S4B, 21S4C on larger chassis. If you see extra reversing valves, don't freak out. They're used for segmenting, right? And LEV2D, we always leave that one out, but that guy's sitting there and he's bypassing. He's going to bypass refrigerant, manage refrigerant, and also provide high temperature superheated gas to the branch controller so that we can do the simultaneous heating and cooling. Units that need the heating, we can send hot gas to those units. And I think that about does it. And we're going to have some, like I said, a future episode on heating patterns, and we'll talk about what's happening at the branch controller as well during segmenting. But I think that just about does it. And after all this grill talk, I think I'm going to hit the supermarket tonight and go and grab some. I think I'm going to make my own burgers.
It's so funny you said that. I was going to ask you guys make your own burgers or?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
like ground beef and make it, baby.
Now, let me ask you, you put egg in there?
Yes.
And, okay.
Yeah, that's-
all right, for the binder.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's-
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about the egg. I've done it a bunch of times, and I don't know if the egg is good or bad. Or I was told by a lot of people that just the
meat.
the ground chuck or hamburg or whatever you're using, and you never add the spices first. You could always put them on the outside of the burger, not on the inside. One thing that I like doing, and someone showed me this, is you take an onion and you throw it in a blender, and you blend that onion down almost till it liquefies, and you throw that in the hamburg.
Okay.
Oh man!
So here's a weird thing that I do every now and then. People think I'm crazy. Is I actually put sometimes I put condensed milk in my burger.
Yes,
It-
I have
it
done something
elevates it.
similar.
Try
Oh my goodness! You
Try
just
it.
took me to another level.
There
Try
is
it.
Yeah, because Juan's thinking of tres leches.
Oh, you better
where he's
believe it.
from.
No, I'm actually thinking of cuatro leches.
Oh man.
Because the cooked condensed milk is the fourth milk.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There's actually
Juan introduced me to that cake a while back.
there's a recipe that exists out there, and I'm not gonna say I haven't made it before, but it's ground beef, a little bit of that condensed milk, and a little bit of peanut butter, and it will taste exactly like a White Castle burger.
I'm down. I'm totally gonna try that.
Yeah, it works.
Bryn. Yep.
It works.
Interesting. Interesting. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next
All right. Hasta la vista, baby.
one. Bye-bye.
Adios.